From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We are waiting on a decision from Brazil's Supreme Court on former President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva's petition to remain free as he fights a 12-year sentence on corruption charges. Lula's appeal was rejected last month, leaving his fate in the hands of the Supreme Court. If granted habeas corpus, the former president will be free and allowed to continue appealing his case. The same court has already upheld Lula's conviction on taking bribes and money laundering. Today's ruling will decide if Lula will remain a presidential candidate for October's vote. He currently leads the polls. His supporters say they will continue to fight for him.
We have a national agenda of demonstrations. We will walk to the Supreme Court and will ask that Lula get his habeas corpus granted. We will defend Lula's right to answer to justice without being incarcerated, and we will defend it until the last resort, the right to follow a legal process, key in a democracy.
The armed forces is putting pressure on the court. A general said there will be a military intervention if the Supreme Court doesn't move forward with Lula's imprisonment. He added the armed forces will have to restore public order if the Supreme Court's decision sparks violent protests in the country. In Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, thousands of protesters took to the streets to call for Lula's arrest. The chief of Brazil's Supreme Court, Carmen Lúcia, has urged people to remain calm ahead of the ruling and said that ideological differences should not be the source of social disorder.
Brazilians are sick of violence, of so much impunity. We want to change this in Brazil. Brazilians know that this will change if we mobilize, going out into the streets and demanding it.
In Colombia, the killing of former FARC militant continues. On Tuesday, 32-year-old Nelson Andrés Zapata Obregón, who was part of the reincorporation process into society, was shot several times. His body was then abandoned on the road. Social movements are asking the Colombian government to guarantee safety for the territories in the northeast part of the country. The last murder occurred in the Antioquia department, one of the areas where narco-paramilitary groups are getting stronger. With more than 300 murders of social leaders over the last 2 years, Colombia is witnessing the rise of the Gulf Clan, the most powerful narco-paramilitary group in the country. This new generation of paramilitaries has set aside its anti-insurgent strategy to transform itself into a criminal company that sells its services to the highest bidder.
They are a business holding in real life. They sell drug trafficking routes and look over them. They have coca plantations, they do mining, blackmail, people trafficking, and run prostitution in cities like Medellin.
I think nothing speaks more clearly than the figures in Antioquia, which has seen the highest number of social leaders being killed. Human rights organizations in Antioquia published a report where one can clearly see an increase in the murder rate, along with threats and other forms of persecution of human rights defenders. This is worrying because it's linked to other phenomena, such as the consolidation in certain territories of illegal players who are taking over areas the FARC left after demobilizing and who are increasingly gaining strength.
So what do we know of the Gulf Clan? Intelligence reports suggest this criminal organization is only getting stronger.
The Gulf Clan exercises control over almost all Colombian territory. The government says it is funded by drug trafficking, illegal mining, and extortion, and that money is laundered in real estate and international franchises. The organization emerged in 2007, 2 years after the demobilization of another paramilitary group called the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia. That left a void in the drug and extortion business. In its 11-year history, the Gulf Clan has expanded to at least 17 departments of the country. It is particularly strong in Colombia's northern region in the departments of Antioquia, Choco, and Córdoba. It also has a strong presence at the borders with Venezuela and Panama. The government believes the clan has also extended its network with drug cartels in Costa Rica, Honduras, Panama, Guatemala, and Mexico, including the famous Sinaloa cartel, whose head, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, is on trial in the United States. Just last year, Colombia said the clan's membership halved after a major offensive by the government. However, now it warns the Gulf clan is planning attacks on police. It also holds the group responsible for terror attacks against the public, including threatening and murdering social leaders.
Honduras has responded to Donald Trump's threats to cut foreign aid because of a migrant caravan heading to the U.S. The Honduran government defended the steps it has taken to reduce immigration from the country. It says it has tackled cartel violence and strengthened the economy. The government added that it is one of the most successful countries in the region in combating immigration.
We really have advanced on the immigration issue. We think that the claims made by the United States President are not fair, given what we have done so far. Also, all of these efforts to tackle immigration are predominantly financed by taxes paid by the Honduran people. The help from the United States is welcome. It is important, but it should not come at the expense of our country's dignity. That is our position. We're going to continue working on this issue.
And Honduras is not the only country to have reacted to Donald Trump's declarations. Mexico also responded to the U.S. president's threat to send the U.S. military to the border. In an official statement, the Mexican government defended its sovereignty regarding migration policies. It said Mexican authorities are trying to ensure that migration occurs, quote, legally, safely, orderly, and with full respect for people's rights. Meanwhile, hundreds of migrants from Central America continue to move towards the U.S. border. This is part of the caravan that on March 25 started its journey from the Guatemalan Mexican border.
They are running away from poverty and violence in their native countries. They know the risk of crossing Mexico without papers, where migrants are targets of extortion, kidnapping, and even murder. That's why they are asking the government for security.
We want stability for those who are vulnerable and departure documents, humanitarian visas, or some kind of paper to move through this country in the best possible way.
A large part of this group comes from Honduras and plans to arrive at the U.S. border. 250 children who are traveling with them are also victims of hunger and face injustice.
We have the right to progress and to get a better life for our children. There are mothers all alone here. They say that we are taking advantage of this, but we just want the best for our kids. Crime doesn't let us live in our countries.
The caravan has caught Donald Trump's attention. He has even announced that he will mobilize troops to the border while the wall is being built.
This wall idea is many years old. It's existed since President Clinton's government, and now it's being built. What Donald Trump wants is to modernize it.
The Mexican government reacted to Trump's declaration a few hours later. The Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Luis Videgaray Caso, asked Washington to clarify the declarations about the militarization of the border. Mexico's president also called for calm.
We have continued negotiations, and I have hopes the good nature and cordiality of our talks continues. But above all, we must continue to search for results that benefit all three countries that are part of NAFTA.
Social organizations and migrant families consider the Mexican government's actions too weak to face its northern neighbor. They are also worried and upset about migrants being used in exchange for the renegotiation of NAFTA, the economic agreement between the two countries and Canada.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
and the family moved to the northern part of the city, where we became the first family.
Welcome back. There has been another explosion in the Ecuadorian province of Esmeraldas, near the border with Colombia. It comes after a series of attacks in the area and the kidnapping of 3 journalists last week. A communique from the government in Quito says the blast occurred at 1:45 in the morning in Viche. There were no victims and no buildings damaged. It said an investigation is underway and called on citizens to remain calm. In Peru, the country's new foreign minister, Néstor Porpolicio, has announced that Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro is still not welcome to attend the Summit of the Americas in Lima next week, upholding the decision by the former President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski.
And therefore, we do not endorse the decision of Venezuela's government to make fair and free elections impossible, preventing them to develop with legitimacy and credibility, a fact that negates even the slightest notion of democracy and represents an insurmountable impediment to taking part in the Summit of the Americas. This is a firm decision that is not up for revision.
Former Bolivian President Gonzalo Sánchez de Lozada has been found guilty of involvement in a massacre in 2003 by a court in the United States. Bolivian government minister Carlos Romero has demanded the extradition of Lozada to face justice in Bolivia. With more on this, we have our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales.
The tribunal's decision against former President Gonzalo Sánchez de Lozada is expected to come to a close any day now. The civil trial was initiated by 9 family members of the victims of the 2003 massacre. In 2003, 67 people were gunned down and almost 400 injured in an uprising in the city of El Alto against natural gas being exported. The demonstrators were calling for money from the sale to be used for the development of the country. This massacre forced Lozada and his ministers to flee Bolivia for the U.S., where they were granted political asylum. Bolivian extradition requests have been rejected. The process is being handled in a federal court near Miami, where 9 family members of the victims are taking part. Lozada has denied that he is a millionaire despite flaunting his wealth while living in Bolivia. The jury's verdict must be unanimous, which is raising concern that if the verdict is not resolved, it could result in an annulment.
That was our correspondent, Freddy Morales from La Paz. In Cuba, officials elected in the recent elections are taking time to reflect on the goals and challenges of the next 5 years of government.
This 21-year-old woman was elected on the 11th of March as member of the Provincial Assembly of Popular Power in Havana. She knows that her work as a government official will be challenging during the next 5 years.
It will be very difficult not to have our Comandante Fidel with us, nor the legendary generation that started this revolution. But I won't be discouraged. This doesn't mean that we will do the opposite of what we've been doing for many years. We, the youth, are the ones in charge of keeping this great project alive. We must serve to strengthen the bond.
Popular power institutions and work together with the country's citizens.
We must report to the people every 6 months and work together to solve problems.
The incoming members of Congress will be in charge of choosing a new president for Cuba after Raúl Castro finishes his term as leader. This doctor of biology and elected deputy trusts that a new president will be wise and mature enough to lead the island in the best possible way.
I believe we will be in safe hands with our new president. I can't tell who we will be, but I have trust in our parliament, constitution, and the legitimacy of the principles of our National Assembly members.
On April the 19th, during the anniversary of the victory over the Bay of Pigs invasion, parliament members will choose a new president, which may not be part of the historic generation. A new time will begin in Cuban history, and it will be marked by the challenge of defending and perfecting Cuban socialism.
The first summit of indigenous peoples of Iberoamerica will take place in Guatemala over the next 2 days. with information on what attendees can expect. Here's our correspondent, Mario Rosales.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Un saludo hasta el set central. Bueno, acá en
From April 4 to 6, the first summit of high indigenous and ancestral authorities from Iberoamerica will take place in Guatemala, west of the capital city in Antigua. There will be debate and technical tables for indigenous youth, women and elders from different communities of Iberoamerica. This is the first continental event of this kind, looking to present the indigenous communities' positions and claim their rights in front of the Ibero-American Summit, also set for November in Guatemala. The main goal of this meeting in Antigua, Guatemala is to establish the main issues affecting indigenous communities in the region and identify the solutions that should be suggested to the government in order to respect the rights of indigenous peoples. That is what will be discussed in the first summit of indigenous peoples of Iberoamerica.
How's Mario Rosales from Guatemala. Mexican environmentalists and social groups are banding together to denounce a law that supposedly protects biodiversity, but actually favors mining companies and international corporations.
Scientists, indigenous and social leaders are resisting a biodiversity law that they say is tailor-made to benefit mining companies and international corporations.
They are literally removing all restrictions and handing out permits that allow the extraction of species at risk of extinction.
Mexican artists have joined the call to expose the risks that this law brings with it.
This biodiversity law allows applicants to patent and commercialize nature as if it was theirs.
The proposal was approved in the Senate at the end of last year. If the law is approved by the Congress, it is not only the environment that's at risk.
This law means we lose the natural resources of our country. Those resources mean food for us.
Experts denounce the conflict of interests here, since the Green Party and the PRI party senators are the ones who initiated the bill, and have family ties with the businessmen that benefit from it.
The big companies that have controlled the country and that have most of the wealth have established a new route to extract natural resources through this new law, which gives them easier access to the country's biodiversity.
Environmental groups point out that the law was approved illegally. The decision sees this project go against state obligation to safeguard more than 25 million hectares of protected areas that exist in the country.
We'll take another short break, but join us after this look at what our multimedia team reports. Welcome back. The world's chemical watchdog, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, will meet behind closed doors in The Hague over the poisoning of a former Russian spy in Britain last month. The meeting has been called by Russia after a British military lab analyzing the nerve agent used in the attack said it couldn't verify its origin. Russia has criticized the UK for escalating the incident. which led to the tit-for-tat expulsion of dozens of diplomats from Russia in over 20 countries. Britain's Military Research Centre, Porton Down, says it has been unable to confirm that the nerve agent came from Russia, even though this was the basis of the British government's argument against Moscow. Our correspondent Pablo Navarrete has more from London.
Today, Tuesday, the chief executive of the Ministry of Defence Chemical Weapons Facility, Porton Down, has declared on British TV that whilst they have confirmed that the nerve agent used in the poisoning of the Russian double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Julia on the 4th of March was indeed the Novichok nerve agent, they cannot confirm that this nerve agent was in fact produced in Russia, as has been affirmed and asserted by the British government ever since this event took place. The importance of these declarations lie in the fact that British Foreign Minister Boris Johnson, in an interview with German TV, was adamant that he had been told by scientists at Porton Down that the nerve agent was of Russian origin. So this inconsistency in Johnson's declarations and the declarations of the chief executive of Porton Down have meant that various analysts and even politicians are saying that Boris Johnson's position as foreign minister is untenable at the moment, given this inconsistency and the irresponsibility of making such pronouncements. These declarations come a day before the Russian government has called an extraordinary meeting for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in The Hague, Holland, where it is expected that the Russian government will ask or request access to the samples used by the British police whilst collecting in the aftermath of the Salisbury poisoning. A spokesman for Putin, for the Russian President Vladimir Putin, has responded to the declarations of the Porton Down chief executive, saying they show once again that the mad accusations of the British government, which have no basis in evidence. So these are the latest developments in the so-called Skripal case, nearly a month after the poisoning occurred on the 4th of March this year. Back to the studio.
That was Pablo Navarrete from London. China has imposed tariffs on the United States in retaliation against U.S. tariffs on over 1,000 Chinese products. Here's more on that and other stories making headlines from around the world.
China has published a list of products worth $50 billion imported from the United States that will be subjected to higher tariffs. It has also decided to impose an additional tariff of 25% on more than 100 items of products under 14 different categories. The move comes after the U.S. administration announced a list of about 1,300 Chinese products the U.S. is considering imposing a 25% tariff on, worth $50 billion. Police in San Bruno, California have identified a woman who attacked the YouTube headquarters with a handgun on Tuesday, wounding 3 people and allegedly killing herself. The police say that the attacker was 39-year-old Nasim Najafi Agdam from San Diego. Also that she was a vegan blogger who believed YouTube discriminated against her, according to her online profile. The police are still investigating the motive behind the attack.
We are an incredibly tight-knit community within YouTube, and it feels like a family. Today, it feels like the entire community of YouTube and all of the employees were victims of this crime. Our hearts go out to those who suffered in this particular attack, and our prayers are with them and their families.
Indonesia has declared a state of emergency after a deadly oil spill off the coast of Borneo. The spill happened over the weekend and soon caught fire, killing at least 4 people. Video footage on social media showed thick plumes of dark smoke rising from the fire. Hundreds of local people say they are experiencing health problems from the smoke. Local activists have warned of major environmental and economic damage. The local authorities are investigating the oil company responsible.
50 years ago, one of the greatest civil rights activists in U.S. history, Martin Luther King, was assassinated.
Even, he's not here, I feel that his a spirit is with us now, and because of him, our human rights is getting better and better. So I feel really thankful.
King was gunned down at a hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was just 39 years old. King was in Memphis to support striking sanitation workers who were fighting for higher wages and better working conditions. He was killed by James Earl Ray. His assassination shook the world and sparked riots across the U.S. And with this, we've come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And you can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.